Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pilot episode of the Would I Recommend series. How you doing? So, I'm going back to my roots, answering questions that people ask me on the stream. Definitely getting questions about, hey, should I buy Jeff? Should I buy Stegron? Should I buy Snowguard? I'm not really getting that one. But I do want to have a guide just for a quick overview if people are wondering, oh, should I get this card? Should I get a. It's obviously not going to come immediately because I want to have data and a good idea of how the card actually is, but hopefully they'll be quick enough that people will have their answers. So, first thing off, I thought Jeff is a great card to start the series off. Would I recommend Jeff? So, let's go into the breakdowns. So, first off, Jeff's ability, you can move this once. Nothing can stop you from moving or playing this to any location. So, there's a lot of power in this text. You are basically a Nightcrawler, right, where you can move this card once, but you have this extra power of nothing can stop you from being played, nothing can stop you from being moved. Unless it gets destroyed, maybe you can't really play into Death's Domain. But other than that, there's really not a lot of caveats for limiting where Jeff's ability is. So that has a lot of power in that things that normally would stop a card from being played, lockdown, destruction, anything like that, you just don't care about it. So some of the usefulness of an ability like that is you ignore location, you ignore ability effects. Sandman doesn't matter. Professor X doesn't matter. Any lockdown, Sanctum doesn't matter. You can just play the card there. You can move it there. Doesn't really bother you at all. Another good ability of being able to move is that your opponents can't fully guess where you're going to play Jeff. You can either keep it in the location you played it, or you can move it to another location. That really makes it hard for them to fully predict, oh, I'm going to play, you're going to have this much power here or this much power there. They always have to incorporate, what if they put Jeff here? What if they put Jeff there? And that keeps your opponent guessing. And that's a very good trait you want your deck to have, for your opponents not to know exactly what you're going to do when you're going to do it. So that's definitely a big useful factor for Jeff. And it's just a nice, surprising final turn play if your opponent has locked you down with Professor X or something, or they've played Sandman or something, and they just don't expect you to say, oh, did you do something? Well, I don't care. Jeff goes here. I don't care. Jeff goes there. That can be very surprising, catch your opponent off guard. And it's just a nice tool to have for the final turns as well, to be able to move it to anything you want. And then finally, this is a very flexible card. You can kind of put it into any deck that needs a good, useful 2-drop. It fits that tempo niche. It also just fits into a lot of decks. They need some early game. Jeff can be the early game card of choice. Right now, Scorpion and Lizard are really dominating those, but Jeff can now be a useful third addition to that slot. So definitely a flexible card, has a lot of usefulness. But let's also talk about some of the weaknesses of Jeff. Obviously, a card is going to have their strengths and their weaknesses. I would say Jeff doesn't have that many weaknesses. I would say one of it is its basic stat line. A 2 for 3 isn't bad, but it's not premium. It's not a 2 for 5. It's not a 2 for 4. 2 for 3 stat lines really are just common, so it doesn't stand out in the field, which is something that would be a weakness, because anytime you're playing a card, you have to compare that card against every other card in its slot. You're comparing every 2-drop with every other 2-drop. So if it's just an average card in that 2-drop metric, it's not going to have enough of a benefit to pick it among the plethora of 2-drops in there. So the basic stat line is not really helping it in that regard. So something to knock points off. And then it's not an archetype defining cards. There are definitely some cards that if you play with it, you can build around and you could say, oh, This card lets me do something completely new with deck design. This card lets me build a deck around it and then have supplemental pieces. This is really not a card that can do that. It is a card that has synergy with other archetypes, but is not an archetype generating card in itself. So that's not a lot of downsides for a card to have. So it still has a lot of good things going for it. Now I want to talk about some of the compositions that Jeff can usually be played into. Jeff is pretty flexible, but there are some standouts. Cerebro 3 is something Jeff does work well in because it has 3 health. Cerebro 2, Cerebro 3 are really the most common Cerebro numbers, and being a 3 cost card that has a good effect as a cheap cost and an effect that's useful slots into that. Control is also a very common archetype to play Jeff in, mostly because of Professor X. The fact that you can just ignore that lockdown ability of Professor X and still play into that lane is pretty unique, and there's really no other card that can do something like that. The only way to really buff Professor X is to buff the cards inside of that lockdown itself. Isn't really an easy way to put a new card in there. And then Sandman Ramp also works pretty well with Jeff, mostly because Jeff doesn't care about the Sandman ability. You say, oh, you can only play 1 card per turn. Jeff says, nah, I'll just play myself afterwards. So that is a nice benefit you can do. Another thing with Sandman Ramp that Jeff works with is it allows you to play Empathy Maw much more freely than you normally would be able to. So normally when you play Empathy Maw, you can't play other cards into that lane. But Jeff once again says, I don't care about that. I'll just play into that Ebony Modeling. So instead of being limited to saying, I'll just play Ebony Maw and then I'll never play into that lane, I hope that my Dr. Doom will supplement that lane. Now you can do turn 1 Ebony Maw, turn 2 Jeff. And it really doesn't feel that bad anymore to play Ebony Maw early because you can always supplement that lane with a Jeff. So definitely a big plus with the the Sandman decks that can really work. And then lastly, any tempo 2-drop spot you can just play in. So anytime a lizard or a scorpion could be played in a deck, instead of using those, you can just play Jeff because it fits that. It's a good card. It has some upsides and really just supplements that. So it's just a very flexible card. You can play into a lot of things. So big ups for that. And now let's talk about some of the compositions, the builds that you can run in. I do have some example builds with all the compositions that we talked about. First one is Electro Ramp. We have a pretty nice Electro Ramp. You have the Ebony Maw Jeff synergy, you have the Sandman Jeff synergy, and just Sandman is a very common deck being played right now. It locks out a lot of compositions that people are playing, any Thanos decks, any really flood decks, Hid Monkey decks. Sandman just really does a lot of damage into those decks. So the power of Jeff to be played into the Ebony Maw or after the Sandman is just really nice, gives you more options, and is a really good tool to play. Following up, we have Control. So this is just a nice control deck, but it does also have the junk value of using Vipers, using Debris, Green Goblin to also mess with your opponent. The big power of the control is to Professor X and then still move a Jeff in there if you need that extra power, or you could have Jeff in there already and be able to move that Jeff out of the Professor X into another lane. So there's a lot of big tools for this. This isn't a super duper expensive. Well, it is kind of expensive. There's a ton of Series 3 cards in this one, but it is a nice control deck that I have played. I've tested this one myself, and it did feel pretty good. I would say you don't really need Black Widow in this one if I'm, criticizing my own deck here, but overall, I still think it's a deck that works really well and saw a pretty good amount of success with it. And next up, we do have the Cerebro 3. If you guys are Cerebro 3 fans, Jeff does work pretty well here. You've got a lot of synergies. You could also put Professor X in a Cerebro 3 deck, just have that extra synergy, but you don't need it. If you want it, you can do it, but you don't really need it. And then you just have general Professor or Cerebro 3 deck synergies with the Valkyrie, with the Basque, just to really supplement it. I'm not a big fan of Cerebro 3 generally. I just think it has too many ways to lose. And you're also pretty required to have Cerebro on your board. It's kind of hard to win the game without the Cerebro in any function. You can maybe do it with Iron Man, but it's usually harder than if you had Cerebro. So I'm not a big fan. But if you do want to play Cerebro and this looks interesting, you do feel free to try it. And the last build is just some random list that I found that looked cool. I have not tested this one. I'm going to be honest. Didn't test it. I looked at it and I was like, this looks funky, but looks like it could work. So definitely feel free to try it out. I'm not telling you that it's going to win you your games, but it looked pretty cool to me. Makes sense to me. So definitely feel free to try it. Now, in terms of recommendations, right, I have two different levels of recommendations. So let's go into the first one. This is a 12,000 token plus recommendation level. Now, does this mean this means if you don't have 12,000 tokens, you can't get it? No. This is a recommendation for people who have tokens to spend. If they're not really worried about not playing a card later down the road, this isn't necessarily the, oh, you must get this card level. And there's not going to be the problem is there's not going to be a lot of cards that are going to be in a you must get this card level. There's really going to be like one every few months most of the time where the card is game breaking enough or meta defining enough that you feel like you have to get it. So I wanted a different level that if people just wanted to play, wanted to have fun, this is the level for them that they want to look at. It's essentially if you have room to spare and you don't mind not wasting, but like using your tokens in a liberal fashion, then this is the level to look at. If you want okay, I only have 6,000, I only get one buy per month or one buy every 2 months. What am I getting? That's the next level. But in terms of that, I also have some caveats. So there's 3 caveats where if the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you override me. You override my recommendation. Whatever I say, you can override this. So are there decks you want to play with the card right now? If you're thinking, oh, I really want to make a Jeff deck, that might be good enough to just get it regardless of what I say. And does Jeff make you want to play the game? So if you're like, ooh, I really want to play, having this card will really make me want to play Marvel Snap, then that's good enough reason to get the card regardless of what I say. And then do you think you'll be playing decks using the card for the next 3 months? So obviously after 3 months, the card is going to drop down to Series 5, and then it's going to be 3,000 cheaper. But if you think that you're going to get 3,000 tokens worth of use with the card, then it doesn't really make sense to wait the extra 3 months just to save 3,000 tokens. I don't really think it makes that much sense. So if any of those are a yes for you, then override my recommendation and then just get the card yourself. But my personal recommendation for would I get this card if I had tokens to spend, like 1,200 tokens or more, something like that, would be a yes. I would say Jeff is good enough. It fits a lot of archetypes, flexible enough. It will see play almost guaranteed in the meta game that it's going to be hard not to think this is a card that will see a lot of play in decks moving forward. I've personally bought Jeff already, and that I can almost never say that. I can almost never say that I've bought a card recommended because I'm pretty stingy with things, but I do think Jeff is a card that makes sense if you have extra tokens, if you think it's fun, if you want it, that I can definitely safely recommend Jeff for this particular level. Now, let's go to the 6,000 tokens level. So you only have 6,000 tokens, and you want to make sure that your purchase is good. Your purchase is defining. Your purchase you will be happy with this for the future. Now, once again, I have some recommendations that can override what I recommend here. Now, these are, does this card break the meta in your opinion? Not my opinion, But do you think this card breaks the meta? If you do, then obviously you should probably get it regardless of what I say. Are you disadvantaged by not playing this card? Ooh, I need to fix that. It says am. Are you disadvantaged? Ignore my grammar or my word, whatever. But if you think that not playing this card gives you a lower chance to win, a fundamentally lower chance to win, that, oh, if I'm not playing this card, I'm going to be losing in some way because I'm not playing this card, then yes, obviously you should get the card in general. And then is your play experience frustrating playing against this card and not having the same card to counteract it, blah blah blah? Then yes, maybe you should get it to equalize the locations, the metagame, blah blah blah, right? Then yeah, you should maybe get it. And then last, does not having this card make you not want to play? Right? It's different than does having this card make you want to play. It's does not having this card make you not want to play. If every time you play the game and you think to yourself, I don't have Jeff, why am I even playing? Then maybe yes, you should just get Jeff. Like, whatever tokens you're saving for, whatever card you're saving for, is not worth that pain of having to open up the game every time and look at your account and see there's no Jeff in there. So if any of those are a yes, then override whatever I'm saying in this point and get the card. But personally, in my recommendation, do I think you should get this in terms of a game breaking, you only have 6,000 tokens perspective? That's going to be a no. Now, keep in mind, most cards are going to be a no. I can tell you almost every card I review here for 6,000 tokens, I'm going to say, no, I don't recommend it. It has to break the game, or it has to be meta defining, essentially, for me to recommend it. The only card at the top of my head in the future that is revealed that I might say yes here would be High Evolutionary. That's the only one in the future that I'm thinking about. Every single card for like the next 3 months that I'm thinking of, I don't really see it. So, this is the general sentiment. I would say most of the time, look at this particular feature, the 1,200 plus, the 12,000 token plus. That's really going to give you the most bang for your buck, because if you're watching this video, that probably means you care about this card in some metric. So you want someone to nudge you into like, yes, you can get the card. And this is the screen to look at, the 1,200 tokens. This is the nudge. Hey, yes, you can get this card. But overall, it's not like a meta breaking card. So that's why it's a no in this particular slot. But hope you guys liked this format. I want to do these for more of the cards just so that I can tell people, hey, just watch this video. I answer your question, because I got this a lot and I am getting it with Stegron. So I'm going to make one for that one in particular. But overall, take care. Have a nice, wonderful day. And I'll see you in the next one.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow, snap. Your skills will be improved.